Hey guys, tonight we are stepping past the sandstone gates of ancient Egypt into a palace so shiny even the sun god Ra might have squinted if he walked by. Here we explore the chaotic, glamorous, and occasionally ridiculous daily lives of the pharaoh's concubines. So dim the lights, maybe grab a cool drink of iced tea or something stronger. Because this story is going to be a ride through history with more drama than 10 Netflix shows combined. Imagine waking up in a palace where your alarm clock is not a rooster, not a bell, but a servant throwing open linen curtains while chanting prayers to Hathor. You are yanked from your bed of reed mats and silk sheets at an hour when even the Nile crocodiles are still snoozing. The maid whispers, "Rise, noble lady," with the enthusiasm of someone who slept just fine in her little corner while you forgot what 8 hours means. Another attendant rushes to adjust your hair as if your bed had insulted the gods themselves. You are barely awake, but apparently you must now transform into a golden goddess, ready to impress not only the pharaoh, but also 50 other women who would happily trip you into a fish pond. Forget yawning. Yawning is for farmers in muddy fields, not for royal favorites competing for eyeliner superiority. In fact, every second you waste on blinking is one more second someone else gets ahead in the beauty arms race. So, before you can mutter anything resembling a complaint, your face is dabbed with ochre rouge, kohl eyeliner, and more perfume than a modern shopping mall. One girl is brushing her hair as if it owes her money, another is braiding while humming ominous hymns, and someone is definitely whispering about your puffy eyes. Congratulations, you have now become a living statue made of nerves, makeup, and panic. And why all this rush? Not really for the pharaoh. Because honestly, he might be out building pyramids or writing poems that sound like riddles a 5-year-old invented. This was about survival among your colleagues, each one hungrier for status than a cat near roasted fish. Breakfast in the pharaoh's palace was not about eating, it was about performing a silent opera of power over bowls of lentils and honey cakes. Concubines sat in strict order rank, decided by everything from their family status to who the high priest had smiled at last week. If you were lucky, you got the warm bread placed nearest to the sunlit side of the room. If not, well, enjoy your cold figs and pretend you were honored. Menus looked luxurious. Figs, dates, honeybeer duck, eggs. But you were expected to nibble like a hummingbird on a diet. Eat too much, and you were greedy. Eat too little, and you were suspiciously plotting. Every bite became a political act. Do you chew gracefully, like a lotus in the breeze, or bite like you have been possessed by? Said himself. Even chopsticks were not a problem here, but handling bread with your fingertips had to look like a delicate ceremony, not survival. A misplaced crumb on your lap, and suddenly someone whispers, "She has no grace. May the gods be embarrassed." Meanwhile, conversation was a different battlefield. Nobody said what they actually meant. A casual, "Your new necklace is unique," could mean, "Wow, that looks like you stole it from a tomb," or "Your family is losing influence, and I am thrilled." Complimenting the pharaoh was the safest move, even if his poetry compared his nose to the Great Pyramids in a way that made no sense. Everyone clapped politely and praised his wisdom, though secretly most thought he sounded like a drunk scribe. But it did not matter. Authenticity was for peasants, performance was for queens. Breakfast ended not with satisfaction, but with relief, because at least you survived one more round of social combat over lentil stew. After breakfast came the most dangerous ritual of all, being seen in the palace courtyards. This was not walking, this was floating, gliding, trailing yards of linen robes behind you like a portable river of fabric. You had to move slow enough to look graceful, but not so slow you look lazy, and definitely not too fast, or you looked desperate. Every glance, every tilt of the head, every shimmer of gold jewelry was part of a silent script. Your job was not to enjoy the gardens, but to be a living advertisement for your own relevance. The koi ponds became mirrors where you checked if your eyeliner was still sharp enough to cut through competition. If another concubine complimented you within earshot of a servant, that praise could travel faster than gossip along the Nile. Suddenly, the high priest might mention your name to the pharaoh at lunch, and boom, you just upgraded your room by 2 windows. But the opposite was Also true, one awkward step, one clumsy trip over your own sandal, and you would fuel jokes for weeks. Everyone pretended to be casual, but every move was calculated effort disguised as ease. And spies were everywhere, not assassins with daggers, but maids with sharp eyes and sharper tongues. Smile too much, and you were scheming. Smile too little, and you were plotting against the throne. The art was effortless threat, never trying too hard, but never invisible. Either invisible concubines did not survive long. They were banished to embroidery rooms where even the walls yawned from boredom. So you perfected the dance of relevance, one slow blink at a time. Flattery was not a suggestion, it was palace law carved deeper than hieroglyphs on temple walls. If you thought honesty was charming, congratulations, you just demoted yourself to cleaning sandals. The true concubine knew how to flatter not just the pharaoh, but the empress, the priests, and even rivals, just to watch them unravel. You could not simply say, "You look handsome, pharaoh." That was basic, like handing in a blank papyrus. Instead, you needed imagery. Your presence today is like the first flood of the Nile, bringing life to barren lands, now that made hearts, and maybe even bank accounts flutter. The pharaoh might look at you with vague recognition, but your words would echo through the halls like sacred chants. But flattery had rules too little, and you were cold too much, and you were fake. Hit the sweet spot where everyone thought you adored them, but also somehow feared your poetic daggers. Some concubines trained like athletes in the art of admiration, sighing gracefully, nodding at the right moment, and pretending to faint from awe. Sometimes they practiced alone, praising the walls, the cats, the statues of Horus, just to stay in shape. Because you never knew who was listening, and every listener was a messenger to power, flattery was not about truth, it was survival insurance, wrapped in honey words. And the best flatterers were rewarded not just with jewelry, but with something more valuable, attention. Once the palace had been filled with enough compliments to drown a pyramid, it was time for hobbies. Not hobbies to enjoy, but hobbies to prove you were civilized, ladylike, and incapable of boredom. Embroidery was endless stitching golden cobras into linen until your fingers looked like they were personally cursed by raw drop one stitch, and someone might say it was symbolic of your loyalty unraveling. Calligraphy was another punishment, disguised as grace, careful strokes of ink that had to look both divine and threatening. The wrong curve of a letter, and rumors began. She cannot even write her own fate. Music was standard. Every concubine plucked the lute or harp, pretending to miss the pharaoh, even though half the time they barely saw him. The goal was to sound melancholic, not cheerful, because happiness was suspicious in a palace built on intrigue. Reading was allowed, but only texts approved by priests full of moral lessons about obedient wives and tragic endings. Some concubines turned these hobbies into performances, drawing hidden insults into embroidery or strumming notes that sounded like coded warnings. Everyone pretended to enjoy, but deep down, hobbies were just glorified waiting rooms with more expensive cushions. At least it kept your hands busy, so you did not stab anyone with a hairpin out of boredom. By midday, the palace heat was rising, and so was the gossip. This was not chatting. This was espionage disguised as casual curiosity over honey wine, whispers about who cried in the courtyard, who looked pale, who received a bracelet from a mysterious handmaid, all traveled faster than the Nile flood. Every rumor was a coin, and concubines traded them like merchants in the bazaar. Information meant power, it meant survival, and sometimes it meant revenge. If you heard, "I should not be telling you this," it meant 10 people already knew, and your turn had just arrived. Sometimes, gossip was planted on purpose, like a poisonous lotus dropped in still water, just to watch the ripples spread. One concubine even started a rumor of her own exile, only to return, dramatically 2 days later, looking radiant and smug. That was not gossip. That was art performance art with eyeliner and attitude. But gossip was dangerous too. If your name was whispered wrong, you could be summoned for questioning by the Empress faster than you could say. I swear Lady Merit started it. The only defense, wide-eyed innocence paired with subtle counterattacks, may be a suspiciously sweet compliment or a conveniently timed embroidered phoenix. Because in this palace, gossip was more than survival, it was war. Evening was when the stakes became deadly serious. The pharaoh's nightly selection. Nobody knew exactly who he would choose. It was a mystery guarded by priests, eunuchs, and maybe even the palace cats. Every concubine, dressed like her life, depended on it, because in many ways, it did. Hair had to be flawless strands, coiled like sacred serpents, or pinned like rising suns. Jewelry was not decoration, it was declaration. A lotus pin meant purity, a falcon pendant meant strength, and one lady wore a scarab brooch. No one understood. But somehow, it worked. Timing mattered too. If you looked too available, you were desperate. If you looked too busy, you were invisible. The goal was effortless readiness, serenity mixed with undeniable shine. Some bribed servants to whisper their names. Others fasted 3 days to appear ethereal, glowing like a divine vision. One even claimed a falling star was a sign she must be chosen. Unfortunately, it only earned her extra incense duty. Most nights ended in disappointment for every woman. Summoned, 10 others smiled politely, while secretly plotting into their pillows. But hope was resilient. Tomorrow might be your turn, or never, either way. Patience was your only job description. If chosen, you began a transformation ceremony that made modern spa treatments look lazy. You were bathed not by yourself, but by attendants scrubbing you like sacred statues until your skin smelled of lotus and honey. Every toe was inspected as if it could make or break dynasties. Perfume was poured so generously you worried about attracting every cat within 10 miles. Then came the robes, layers upon layers of linen embroidered with gold, so heavy you could barely lift your arms. Hair was shaped into elaborate crowns, stiff enough to block the desert wind. And finally, makeup applied so thick you might be mistaken for a new mural. But the absurdity was not over, because you were not allowed to walk to the pharaoh's chambers. Instead, you were carried on a blanket by servants like a slightly nervous statue being delivered to a temple, symbolic of submission, grace, and also maybe logistical comedy. Inside his chambers, rules continued: no speaking, unless spoken to, no eye contact, unless invited, and absolutely no yawning. Even if the pharaoh decided to lecture about stars for an hour, you nodded like it was wisdom from the gods. The night was not intimacy. It was dynasty management with incense. Morning came too early after such ceremonies, and the palace was merciless about it. Even if you slept on a bed harder than stone, you had to rise. Glowing tea was served, not because you wanted it, but because it gave you something to do while everyone stared like hawks. You were now that one, the woman of the night. At least until tonight reset the game. Your rival studied you like scribes decoding hieroglyphs. Was her hair slightly tousled, deliberate, or genuine? Was she wearing a new bracelet? Was it gold or just polished bronze? Every detail was a message, every accessory a clue. You had to smile mysteriously enough to suggest favor, but not smug enough to spark rage. And while you sipped your tea, the gossip mill began already turning your night into legend or ridicule. Either way, you played the role of silent, glowing mystery. Because in this palace, image was everything, reality was optional. And so the cycle continued day after day, night after night. Survival wrapped in silk and sarcasm. Concubines lived not in luxury, but in performance, a theater of power hidden behind eyeliner and honeycakes. Every sunrise was another audition, every sunset, another gamble. You were not just women of the pharaoh, you were gladiators of subtlety, your weapons complements, your shields, smiles, your battlegrounds, courtyards, dining halls, and embroidery rooms. To outsiders, the palace looked divine, golden halls filled with music and laughter. Inside it was tension sharpened like obsidian daggers. But still, every concubine played her part gracefully, fiercely, relentlessly. Because obscurity was worse than exile, and silence more dangerous than scandal. To be seen was to survive. To be remembered was to win. And thus the palace lived a rhythm of drama, vanity, and endless performance. Hey, guys, tonight, we only scratch the surface of their world. But, trust me, the deeper we go, the stranger it gets. So, grab your seat. Because tomorrow, the palace wakes again, and the game begins anew. The road stretched longer than it should have, and the trees on either side leaned closer, as if they wanted to whisper something directly into my ears. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment I felt like I was walking inside a dream where time refused to move. The silence grew heavy, and I could hear my own heartbeat louder than the crunch of my footsteps. I remembered the old man's words about never walking down this road after dark, because it was not made for people anymore. The shadows twisted, and I swore I saw one stretch across the path, like a living hand reaching for me. I wanted to turn back, but something deeper in me whispered that I'd already gone too far to return safely. The cool night air no longer felt refreshing but sharp, like needles crawling on my skin. Every sound became amplified. The snap of a branch made me jump. The rustle of leaves felt like footsteps following me. I kept walking, telling myself over and over that fear was only in the mind, yet my body did not believe it. Somewhere ahead, I saw a faint light, but it was not steady like a lantern. It pulsed like it was alive. The closer I moved, the more it shifted colors from white to red, from red to blue, and then to something I could not name. The ground beneath me began to feel soft, as though I was no longer stepping on dirt, but on something breathing. I froze, staring at that pulsing glow that seemed to beat in rhythm with my own heart. A deep instinct screamed inside me to run, but my legs refused to obey. It was like the night itself had swallowed me and was waiting to see if I could escape. I finally forced myself to move, but each step dragged like I was walking through thick water. The glowing shape ahead grew larger, but it was still hidden behind the branches of the crooked trees. A strange humming filled the air, low and constant, almost like chanting, yet there were no words, just vibrations. The forest that had once looked like nature now looked like walls of a prison, bending in unnatural angles. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked tight, as if invisible hands were gripping it. Suddenly, the air grew warmer, and it carried a smell, not of soil or plants, but of burning iron. I reached out to push a branch aside, and my hand recoiled, because the wood felt hot to the touch. The pulsing glow became clearer, and I realized it was not a lantern, not fire, not even human-made. It looked like a floating sphere, alive, breathing, pulsing, shifting, and watching me, though it had no eyes. I stumbled back, but the sphere moved closer, without sound, without force, but with undeniable intent. My chest tightened and my ears rang like the world itself wanted to crush me into silence. The humming grew louder, until I felt my bones vibrating in my skin. Somewhere inside my head, a voice that was not my own whispered that I should not have come here. The forest seemed to lean closer. The trees bent over me, as if bowing to whatever that sphere was. And in that moment, I knew I was no longer walking a road, but standing at the edge of something ancient. The sphere stopped only a few feet away and hovered in the air, like it was choosing what to do with me. Its light washed over me, and for a second I felt both weightless and crushed at the same time. Images flashed inside my head, not memories of mine, but fragments of strangers, faces, voices, screams. It felt like the sphere was digging through my soul, flipping through pages of my life like a book. I gasped and dropped my flashlight, but the beam landed upward, showing the trees above me, trembling. The light of the sphere made the world around me vanish until it was only me and the thing floating before me. My breath shook as the whisper in my mind grew louder, telling me that this was not the first time it had come here. I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted into the ground as if the earth itself chained me in place. The glow expanded and contracted like a lung, but with every pulse, it took more of my strength away. Suddenly I realized my thoughts were no longer mine, because I was thinking words I never knew before. They spoke of doors, hidden in the forest doors, that opened not with keys but with fear itself. The ground rumbled softly, and I knew something was trying to wake beneath my feet. My chest ached, and my eyes watered, but I could not look away from that sphere. The silence turned into a roar that only I could hear, though the forest looked completely still. And just before I lost all sense of self, the glow dimmed as if granting me one last chance. My legs buckled and I fell to my knees, staring at the dirt that no longer looked like dirt. It moved like waves shifting, crawling alive with veins of faint blue light running through it, I crawled back, but the ground pulsed and forced me closer to the sphere like a magnet pulling iron. I tried to close my eyes, but even in darkness, the image of the glow burned inside my vision. It was not light anymore. It was presence, and that presence wanted to merge with me. I screamed, but no sound came out, only the shaking of my body and the rattling of my teeth. The whisper returned, sharper and clearer, telling me that I was chosen because I had dared to walk alone. The trees bent lower, and their branches reached toward me as if they wanted to drag me deeper into the soil. My heart pounded so fast it felt like it would burst, yet my body felt colder than stone. I thought of my home, my family, my life. But the images shattered as quickly as they came. The glow pulsed again, and my skin tingled as if invisible threads wrapped tightly around me. I clawed at the earth, leaving marks, but the ground swallowed them instantly, like it was alive. The sphere hovered inches from my face, and I could see its surface swirling with shapes like eyes, mouths, and hands. Every instinct told me to fight, but my body betrayed me, lying still, as if already surrendered. And in that terrifying silence, the glow touched me, time = 2s. The moment it touched me, my world shattered into thousands of pieces that floated like glass in an endless void. I was no longer in the forest. I was standing in a place where the ground was black and the sky was nothingness. The only light came from fragments of memories hanging in the air, glowing faintly like stars. I reached out to one, and it burst, showing me a vision of a man running down the same road decades ago. He screamed, but no sound came out, and then he vanished into the sphere, just as I had. Another fragment showed a woman clutching her child, standing at the edge of the glowing orb. Her face twisted in horror before she too dissolved into silence and light. Every memory was the same strangers from different times, all swallowed by the presence that now surrounded me. The whispers returned, overlapping, countless voices speaking as one, yet none belonging to humans. They told me this place had no end. This was not a prison, but a gathering of those who crossed the path. The fragments swirled faster, and I felt them striking me, filling me with weight that was not mine. Each vision I absorbed made me feel heavier, older, like I was carrying centuries of strangers within me. I screamed into the void, and this time sound echoed, though it did not feel like my voice anymore. The black ground cracked beneath my feet, and light spilled upward like fire ready to consume me. And I knew this was not a dream. It was a trap older than time itself. The rain outside tapped against the broken windows like a warning voice. Shadows in the hallway moved like waves, rising and falling without reason. Each creak of the old wooden floor felt like a step coming closer and closer. The candle flame flickered as if it feared the air around it. A whisper traveled through the room, low and crawling into every ear. It carried no language, only fear, and a weight that pressed on the chest. The walls seemed to stretch taller, like a mouth opening to swallow them. Every breath they took felt heavier, as if the house was pulling it away. Something unseen brushed past their shoulders, cold and damp. The smell of wet earth rose suddenly, as though the ground had opened inside. The silence broke with a sigh, not theirs, but belonging to something else. It lingered close, like someone leaning in just out of sight. The room darkened further, even though the candle was still burning. Hands shook and eyes darted, searching for what could not be found. The air said, "Leave yet." The floor beneath them whispered, "Stay." Staircase groaned as if alive, breathing beneath their feet. Each step carried weight heavier than their own bodies. Shadows twisted longer than the figures making them. The rail felt like bone, smooth and cold under their touch. Dust rose with every step, filling the air with choking silence. A door at the top stood half open, inviting and threatening. The sound of chains dragging echoed faint and slow. A chill rose up their spines with every note of that sound. The candle flame stretched thin, almost bending toward the door. Voices murmured beyond, but none could be understood. It was like hearing a crowd pray, in a language long forgotten. One step closer, and the voices stopped, instantly sharp. The silence after was more frightening than the noise before. A cold wind blew, though no window was open. They knew something waited, yet could not turn back. The room ahead smelled of iron, and wet stone walls glistened as though sweating with the weight of years. The ceiling dripped steady drops, like a heartbeat too slow. A broken chair sat in the center, as though waiting for a guest. On it lay ropes frayed, but still stained with dark marks. The sight felt older than memory, yet fresh enough to sting. The candle flickered, showing scratches carved deep in wood, names repeated again and again, clawed into the surface. The whispers returned, crawling from those scratches themselves, each name spoken by a voice that did not belong in this world. Their own name appeared among the carvings, suddenly clear. No one had carved it, yet there it was, written as if by the house. The walls shook faintly, as if breathing around them. A low laugh echoed without a source circling the room. The candle went out without wind, without touch. Darkness swallowed every corner, until eyes invented their own shapes. Figures shifted closer, though nothing had moved. The sound of bare feet padded on the floor, slowly circling. Cold fingertips brushed the back of their necks without form. Breath gathered against their ears, long and heavy. The laughter grew deeper, like earth itself rumbling. Something whispered their name, dragging the syllables too long. The floorboards bent downward, like sinking into a chest. The air thickened like smoke, though no fire burned. They reached for the candle, but only touched air too wet. Fingers locked onto theirs, though no hand was seen. Pulling, tugging not away, but deeper into the dark. Every heartbeat thundered, yet felt drowned by another rhythm, one that came from beneath the house, pounding upward. Fear held them, yet curiosity forced them not to run. A faint red glow rose from the floor, cracks thin as veins. It pulsed like blood moving through wood, alive and restless. The glow spread up the walls, painting every shadow darker. Symbols appeared, burning faint on the ceiling, circles within circles. The whispers grew into chanting, loud but without voices visible. Each word vibrated in the chest like a drum from inside. The floor opened slowly, not breaking but parting like lips. Beneath was no ground, only a pit of endless red light. Heat rose with a stench of rot mixed with sweet perfume. Figures leaned from the glow without faces, only outlines. Their hands stretched upward, thin, long-reaching. The ropes on the chair tightened as if waiting for someone. The names on the walls glowed as if freshly carved. Their own name burned brighter than the rest, and the house whispered welcome as the glow grew stronger. The silence inside the house was not normal. It had a pulse, like the heartbeat of something unseen. Every breath felt heavy, like the air was soaked in secrets that should never be spoken. I moved deeper, and the walls around me seemed to breathe with faint whispers. The candle in my hand flickered, and shadows stretched longer than they should. I heard a creak upstairs, slow and deliberate, like footsteps trying not to be noticed. Each step echoed like someone pacing, waiting for me to come closer. The banister felt icy, as if touched by hands that were not living. I called out, but my voice came back distorted like another tone layered over mine. The stairwell twisted ahead, and the smell of damp earth grew stronger. At the top of the stairs, a figure flickered in and out like a broken light. It was not solid, yet not empty. Something caught between being and nothing. The eyes glowed faintly, yellow, watching, but unblinking. I froze, unable to move, as a low hum filled the hall. The air pressed against my chest as if the house wanted me to kneel. I took a step forward, and the hum grew into a distant scream. The scream did not come from one throat. It sounded like 100 voices at once. They rose and fell like a storm of agony circling the walls. My hands shook, and the candle almost went out, but I kept moving. The wallpaper peeled with age, curling like dead skin, revealing black wood underneath. Each door I passed had claw marks etched deep into the surface. Something had tried to get out, not in, and the thought chilled me. One door rattled violently, as if fists were pounding from inside. I staggered back, but the door stopped moving instantly, like it was waiting for me. A whisper curled around my ears, saying, "You should not have come." I turned, but no one was there, only the empty hall. Breathing with me, dust floated in slow spirals, like it wanted to touch my face. The floor beneath me groaned as though hollow, ready to break. From the end of the hall, a light glowed, faint blue, cold, and inviting. It was the only thing pulling me forward in the sea of shadows. I walked toward it, though every step screamed, "Turn back." The blue light led me into a narrow corridor, narrower than it should be. The walls pressed in like they were trying to swallow me whole. My shoulders scraped the sides, leaving streaks in the dust. The whispers followed louder now, repeating my name, in tones I never heard before. The floor was uneven, sinking as if someone had walked it for centuries. A window appeared on the left, but outside was not the night sky. It showed a graveyard covered in endless fog, stretching forever. Shapes moved in the fog, slow and bending like broken figures. I pressed closer to see, but the glass was warm against my hand. A shape, inside the window, suddenly pressed its face against mine. Its eyes were hollow, and its mouth stretched too wide to be real. I staggered back, but the figure mirrored me exactly. The window cracked from the inside, releasing a faint hiss of air. The light ahead flickered, warning me not to stop. My chest tightened, yet I kept going, pulled deeper into the dark. The corridor ended in a door, older than the rest, black and splintered. It looked alive, veins of shadow pulsing across its surface. My hand hovered above the handle, but it moved on its own. The door creaked open with a sound, like bones snapping in sequence. The room inside was circular, lined with tall mirrors facing inward. Each mirror reflected not me, but different versions of me. One was pale and lifeless, lying on a cold floor. One had eyes missing dark holes staring back. Another was smiling with blood dripping from its teeth. My breath came fast as I turned in circles watching them move. They were not just reflections. They were acting on their own. One of them raised its hand and pointed directly at me. Suddenly, all the mirrors cracked, spiderwebs spreading like veins. The air filled with a sound like glass screaming. Shards began to fall, but hung in the air suspended. Each shard reflected something else, not me, but things waiting outside. Shards twisted slowly, showing images of the graveyard, the corridor, the stairwell. But now figures walked inside each scene like shadows wearing faces. Their movements were wrong, jerky, and looping like broken film. I reached out to push one shard away, but it cut my finger instantly. The blood dripped, and the shard drank it, soaking it in completely. The rest of the shards trembled and pulled closer, circling me like predators. The reflections inside shifted, and all the faces turned toward me. Every version of me began to whisper in unison, "You belong here. Now." The circle tightened, and the blue light above turned red. I felt the walls vanish, leaving nothing but darkness and glass around me. The sound of breathing filled the void, not mine, but endless others. I closed my eyes, trying to wake up, but sleep never came. When I opened them again, I was no longer in the room. The mirrors had vanished, but the whispers stayed inside my head. I realized I was deeper than before. An escape was fading. The path now was a spiral staircase descending into black. Each step groaned like it would collapse, yet held me in place. A torch on the wall lit itself as I passed, though I never touched it. The flames burned green, throwing shadows that bent unnaturally. The deeper I went, the colder it became, biting into my bones. Whispers turned into laughter, high and sharp like children playing, but the laughter carried something cruel, as if mocking me. The torchlight flickered and shadows began running across the steps. They darted ahead, vanishing below like they were guiding me down. The spiral seemed endless, no bottom in sight, only more stone. I tried to count the steps, but lost track after 100. The walls began to drip with water, smelling of iron and rot. Something brushed my ankle like a hand reaching from below. I froze, but nothing was there, only the sound of dripping. The laughter grew louder, calling me by name, in harmony. At last the staircase opened into a cavern wider than the house itself. Stalagmites rose like teeth, and the air pulsed with faint light. The ground was slick with black water, reflecting a distorted sky. In the center stood a stone altar carved with marks too old to read. Around it were dozens of figures cloaked in shadow, swaying slowly. Their faces hidden, but their bodies jerking as if pulled by strings. The laughter I heard above now came from them, united. They lifted their heads, and their eyes glowed white, unblinking. One of them stepped forward, holding something small in its hands. It was a box, blacker than the cavern, absorbing all light. The figure extended it toward me, silently, waiting for me to take it. The whispers in my skull screamed not to touch it, but my arm moved, on its own, reaching slowly forward. The closer I got, the heavier my chest felt like drowning. When my hand touched the box, the cavern fell silent. The silence was worse than the noise, empty yet suffocating. The figures froze their bodies stiff, as if carved from stone. The box pulsed in my hand like a living heart beating wrong. It vibrated, sending a cold rush through my veins. I wanted to drop it, but my hand refused to obey. The lid of the box slid open without sound, revealing nothing. But the nothing inside was alive, sucking the air around it. Shadows poured out, thick and heavy, coating the cavern walls. The cloaked figures dropped to their knees, faces still hidden. Their voices rose in a chant deeper than any human throat. The ground trembled. The stalagmites cracked and fell. Water surged higher, swallowing my feet as the chant grew. The nothing from the box spread like smoke, twisting shapes inside. Each shape had a face distorted, screaming, yet silent. They rushed toward me, and the cavern vanished. In a blink, I was standing back in the house, but it was not the same house. The walls dripped with darkness, alive and shifting in waves. The doors were gone, only endless halls stretching into shadow. Windows revealed not the outside world, but that same graveyard. The fog pressed against the glass like it wanted to come in. My reflection in the glass was gone. Only hollow space. A sound like chains dragging echoed from every direction. The whispers no longer warned, they begged me to stop. Something massive moved above, shaking dust from the ceiling. The entire house groaned, bending like a beast awakening. Shadows crawled along the floor, wrapping around my ankles. I tore free, but they followed, slithering like black serpents. Every hallway led me back to the same spot, no matter which I chose. The box pulsed in my hand, stronger and hungrier. I felt it feeding on my heartbeat, as if claiming ownership. The air thickened like liquid, each breath heavy to pull in. I heard knocking behind the walls, slow and rhythmic. It grew louder, until the plaster cracked, revealing black hands. They clawed through, reaching out, grabbing at nothing. The knocking became pounding, shaking the entire structure. I stumbled back, but the shadows pushed me forward. Every light in the house exploded at once, showering sparks. Only the glow of the box remained steady, unyielding. The walls leaned inward, pressing closer with each pound. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the air itself. The house wanted me, and the box bound me to it. The pounding stopped, and for a moment silence fell. Then, a single voice whispered right behind me, so close. It said, "You opened it. Now, you belong to us forever." And the floor beneath me gave way, dropping me into endless dark. The mansion doors groaned as if alive. Cold air spilled across the marble floor. Every shadow stretched longer than it should. Sarah clutched her lantern with trembling hands. Michael pressed his palm against the dusty wall. A faint hum rose from beneath the ground. It pulsed like the heartbeat of something buried. The wallpaper peeled in jagged strips. Paintings on the wall followed with hollow eyes. Their frames tilted like broken necks. The hum grew louder with each breath. Sarah whispered that it felt like chanting. Michael shook his head, but swallowed hard. The air vibrated inside their bones. Something unseen was waking beneath the floor. A spiral staircase had appeared at the end of the hall. Iron bars twisted like serpents around its railing. The steps glistened as if wet with sweat. Sarah hesitated before touching the first step. Michael urged her forward, though his voice shook. They descended into the throat of the house. Every step echoed like a drumbeat underground. The chanting rose into a chorus of whispers. The walls sweated with a sticky black ooze. A single candle burned at the bottom. Its flame bent backward against no wind. Symbols carved into the stone pulsed faint red. Sarah traced one with her fingertip. It stung like touching hot metal. Michael warned her to let go, but it was too late. Her skin burned with the mark. It glowed brighter than the candle. The whispers immediately stopped in the air. Silence pressed harder than any sound before. Michael pulled her hand, but the mark remained. A A circle on the floor began to rotate. It was carved deep into the stone. Ash spilled upward like liquid smoke. The candle extinguished itself in one breath. From the circle rose a shadowy form, its body stitched together with black threads. No face could be seen, only a void. Sarah gasped, but could not move away. The shadow reached its hand toward her chest. It spoke her name, though no lips moved. Sarah fell to her knees, clutching her chest. Her heartbeat raced as though dragged outside. Michael shouted at the creature to stop, but the void only turned its gaze toward him. It stretched long fingers dripping with ash. Michael swung the lantern in panic. The glass shattered against the stone floor. Flames leapt across the circle angrily. The creature screamed without a mouth. Its body twisted like smoke against wind. The floor cracked with spreading veins of red. Sarah crawled away, gasping for air. Michael pulled her to her feet. The staircase behind them had disappeared. Now only a tunnel of darkness remained. The tunnel walls pulsed like flesh. Moisture dripped down like sweat from skin. The ground throbbed with each of their steps. Sarah whispered that it felt alive. Michael held her arm tighter than before. Far ahead, a faint green light flickered. It was shaped like a door frame. The whispers returned, but faster and sharper. They circled the pair like angry insects. The air grew hot enough to sting their eyes. Sarah nearly collapsed from the weight of fear. Michael pushed her forward with all his strength. Their footsteps echoed like hundreds behind them. Every breath felt stolen from something else. The green doorway loomed larger with each step. When they reached the doorway, it vanished. In its place was an endless pit. The pit shimmered with glowing eyes below. Each eye blinked in different rhythm. The chanting now came from the pit itself. Michael grabbed Sarah before she could fall. Hands reached upward from the glowing void. They were pale and human, yet not alive. Fingers scraped against the tunnel edge. The sound echoed like nails on bone. Sarah screamed, but her voice was swallowed. Michael held her back. Though his grip slipped, more arms reached out by the dozens. The tunnel shook as though collapsing. The eyes in the pit opened wider and wider. Suddenly, a rope ladder fell from above. It slammed against the edge of the pit. Sarah gasped and pointed at it in disbelief. Michael looked upward, but saw only black. The ladder swayed, though no wind blew. A voice whispered, "Climb, if you want to live." Sarah hesitated, shaking her head violently. Michael grabbed the rope and tested it. It burned like it was alive, but held strong. The arms below were growing closer, fingers brushing the edge of Sarah's shoes. Michael forced her hand onto the rope. Tears streamed down her face in terror. Together, they began climbing upward. The pit screamed as if losing its prey. The climb stretched longer than possible. Every rung twisted under their weight. The rope felt wet like veins of a beast. Sarah's hands bled from the rough fibers. Michael gritted his teeth. Ignoring the pain, far below, the glowing eyes shrank in size. But the whispers chased them up the rope. They hissed in words not fully human. Sarah cried that the rope had no end. Her voice cracked against the endless dark. Michael shouted to keep climbing no matter what. Suddenly a faint glow appeared above. It widened like a hole in the ceiling. Fresh air touched their faces for the first time. They climbed faster with the last of their strength. They pulled themselves through the glowing hole and collapsed onto cold grass outside the night sky, stretched infinite and quiet. But the mansion was nowhere to be seen. Sarah lay shaking against the damp earth. Michael pressed his ear to the ground. Beneath them, the hum still pulsed faintly. The chanting had not ended, only hidden. Sarah whispered that they were not free yet. Michael nodded with hollow eyes. The rope ladder dangled back into the void. Its end swayed like a serpent in air, the hole beneath them sealed without sound. Only the scent of ash remained in the wind. Something whispered again, right behind their ears. They spun around but saw nothing at all. The field stretched empty under the moonlight. But shadows gathered at the edge of the trees. The shadows moved, though no figure stood there. Sarah clutched Michael's arm with icy fingers. The hum from beneath grew stronger again. Michael shouted into the night for it to stop. His voice carried, but did not echo back. The grass bent outward as if something walked. Steps pressed deep, though no body appeared. Sarah screamed that it was following them still. Michael pulled her forward into the trees. Branches snapped and leaves rattled unnaturally. The forest air turned colder than death itself, and the shadows followed in complete silence. The night stretched endlessly as the whispers followed them down the narrow hallway. Every shadow seemed to move like a predator waiting to strike. The air felt colder, as if unseen hands were brushing against their skin. The boy tried to hold the lantern higher, but the flame flickered weakly. Each step they took made the floor creak louder than before. The walls seemed to close in, tighter, as if alive. The father whispered to stay close, but his voice shook with fear. The girl felt something tugging at her braid, but no one was behind her. The mother gasped when she saw faint handprints glowing on the wall. The handprints kept appearing as they moved forward, leading them deeper. The boy muttered that the house was guiding them. The father shook his head, but could not deny the truth. The deeper they went, the heavier the silence became. It felt like the entire house was breathing slowly. Their hearts pounded louder than their footsteps. A faint cry echoed from the far end of the hallway. It sounded like a child, crying softly in the dark. The mother's heart twisted at the sound, as if it was calling her. The girl whispered that it was not a real child. The father grabbed her hand tightly and nodded in agreement. The boy stared ahead, his eyes wide with fear. The cry grew louder as they kept moving. It turned into laughter that was high and broken. The lantern flame dimmed until it was barely a spark. Shadows stretched long across the walls like claws. The sound of breathing surrounded them from every side. The mother whispered for them not to stop moving. The father pushed forward, even though his legs shook. The house seemed endless with no doors or windows. The crying and laughter blended into one horrifying sound. They stumbled into a wide room lit by pale moonlight. The ceiling was high and covered in black stains. In the center stood an old chair, facing the corner. A rope hung above, swaying slowly with no wind. The mother gasped as she saw scratches on the walls. The scratches formed words begging to be freed. The boy whispered that someone had been trapped here. The father stepped closer and touched the rope gently. He froze when it felt warm, as if alive. The girl pointed to the chair, trembling in fear. She swore she saw someone sitting there for a second, but when they looked together, the chair was empty. The air filled with the smell of burnt wood and ash. The sound of footsteps echoed, but no one was near. The lantern flame died, leaving them in silver moonlight. Suddenly, the chair turned slowly on its own. A shadow sat in it, with glowing eyes staring. The girl screamed, but no sound came out. The mother clutched her children, pulling them back. The father stood frozen, unable to breathe. The shadow rose from the chair, towering above them. Its arms stretched longer than any human arms. Its face had no features, only darkness swirling. The boy dropped the lantern to the floor. The glass shattered, but made no sound at all. The room grew darker, though the moon still shone. The mother whispered a prayer under her breath. The shadow tilted its head as if listening. It began to move toward them, without a step. Its body glided across the floor, like smoke. The family ran back toward the hallway in panic. But the hallway no longer looked the same. It twisted and bent like it was alive. Doors appeared where there had been none. Each door slammed shut before they could reach it. The girl cried out for help, but only echoes answered. The boy stumbled as invisible hands grabbed his ankle. The father pulled him free, but left deep marks. The mother screamed when she saw shadows crawling. The walls rippled as if made of liquid darkness. The sound of nails scratching echoed all around them. The hallway stretched longer and longer without end. They could hear the shadow laughing behind them. The girl whispered that the house would never let them go. The boy shouted that they had to keep moving. They finally burst into a spiral staircase descending downward. The steps were made of cold stone dripping with water. The father led the way, urging everyone to follow. The mother carried the girl's hand tightly, never letting go. The boy clutched the broken lantern in his arms. The sound of footsteps followed close behind them, but when they looked, nothing was there at all. The further they went, the colder it became. Their breaths turned white like fog in the air. The stairs seemed endless, wrapping deeper into darkness. Whispers began to rise from below the steps, voices spoke in languages they could not understand. The girl said they were calling her name repeatedly. The boy covered her ears, but the voices grew louder. The father urged them to keep their eyes forward. At last they reached the bottom of the spiral staircase. A heavy wooden door stood before them, chained shut. The chains rattled as if something inside was moving. The father grabbed a rusted pipe from the floor. He swung it hard, breaking the lock in one blow. The mother begged him not to open it. The boy whispered that it was their only way out. The girl shook her head, tears streaming down her face. The door creaked open slowly with a scream of metal. A gust of freezing air rushed past them. Inside was a huge underground hall filled with fog. Rows of old statues lined the walls like guards. Each statue had broken faces with hollow eyes. The fog moved like it was alive, swirling around. The family stepped inside against their will. The statues seemed to watch them as they moved. Every step they took echoed far too loudly. The girl clung to her mother, sobbing quietly. The boy whispered that the statues were breathing. The father shook his head, though he felt it too. The fog thickened, making it hard to see. Suddenly one statue cracked and shifted slightly. A sound like stone grinding filled the air. Another statue moved its arms slowly downward. The mother gasped as more statues began to turn. Their hollow eyes glowed faintly in the dark. The father shouted for everyone to run forward. The fog swirled into faces screaming without sound. The boy stumbled again, but the girl pulled him. The hall seemed to stretch endlessly with no exit. The statues stepped down from their pedestals silently. Their stone bodies moved with unnatural grace. The sound of cracking filled the hall as they walked. The family ran faster, but the fog held them back. The mother's voice trembled as she prayed loudly. The father's pipe swung against one statue, shattering it. But the pieces crawled back together on the floor. The girl screamed as a cold hand touched her shoulder. The boy pulled her away, just in time. The glowing eyes of the statues lit up brighter. The hall shook, as if the ground would break apart. The fog turned red, like blood filling the air. The family coughed as it burned their throats. The statues began chanting in deep, hollow voices. The words echoed like thunder, shaking their hearts. At the far end of the hall, a gate appeared. It glowed faintly, like salvation, calling them closer. The father shouted for everyone to run faster. The statues followed their steps, gaining ground quickly. The boy dropped the broken lantern to distract them. The statues paused, staring at the shattered glass. The mother dragged the children forward with all her strength. The girl whispered that the gate was alive. The glow pulsed like a heartbeat growing stronger. The father reached the gate, first pushing against it. But the gate did not move at all. The statues chanted louder, shaking the entire hall. The fog swirled violently, pulling at their clothes. The boy cried that the gate would never open. The mother screamed for them not to give up. The corridor grew colder with every step, as if the air itself carried whispers. Shadows stretched unnaturally long on the cracked walls, trembling like living things. The lights flickered in a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat echoing in the silence. He held his breath as a faint sobbing sound drifted from a locked classroom door. The handle rattled gently, even though no one touched it, making his skin crawl. His reflection in the dusty window warped and twisted, smiling when he did not. He blinked, and it returned to normal, leaving him shaking with confusion. The floor beneath him creaked like it was straining under invisible weight. Dust fell from the ceiling as though something walked above him. A sudden rush of air brushed past his neck like cold fingers caressing skin. He spun around, but the hallway was empty, endless and suffocating. The sobbing turned into laughter, sharp and echoing from all directions. His knees felt weak, but he forced himself to keep walking deeper. Every step sounded like two, as if someone matched his pace behind him. He whispered to himself that he was not alone anymore. A classroom door suddenly opened with a loud screech, breaking the silence. The room inside was filled with broken desks, overturned chairs, and rotting books. The chalkboard had faint writing etched deep like it was carved by claws. Blood-like streaks formed words he could not understand, glowing faintly red. He stepped closer, and the words shifted, forming his own name repeatedly. The sound of children laughing echoed in the corners, though the room was empty. A small ball rolled across the floor, stopping at his feet without reason. He bent to pick it up, but icy small hands grabbed his wrist from under the desk. He yanked his hand away, but no one was there, only the sound of giggles. The lights above him popped one by one until only darkness remained. Whispers swirled around him, calling his name in high-pitched voices. His heart pounded as the ball rolled again, this time toward the door. It stopped at the threshold, and the door slammed shut, trapping him inside. Walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with his every breath. He realized the classroom itself was alive, feeding on his fear. The windows shattered. Inward, filling the room with icy wind and glass shards. He shielded his face as the shards hovered in the air, forming strange shapes. The pieces twisted together, making ghostly faces, screaming without sound. He stumbled back, and the floor beneath him felt soft, almost like flesh. A disgusting stench filled the air, rotting and chemical burning his throat. The desks melted into black tar, oozing across the floor toward his shoes. The chalkboard cracked open down the center like a door to nowhere. From the crack came pale arms reaching, stretching with long broken fingers. They clawed at the floor, dragging themselves out slowly, one by one. Their eyeless faces turned toward him, mouths opening impossibly wide. A deafening roar filled the classroom, shaking the walls with force. He ran to the door, pulling desperately, but it refused to open. The tar climbed higher, gripping his legs like chains trying to hold him. He screamed as the pale arms reached closer, brushing against his clothes. The classroom wanted him, and it would not let him go. Suddenly the door burst open as if thrown by an unseen force. He fell into the hallway, gasping, crawling away from the room behind him. The door slammed shut by itself, and the sobbing returned from inside. He staggered to his feet, sweat dripping, though the hallway was freezing cold. The floor lights dimmed until only one light far ahead remained glowing. He forced himself to walk toward it, because turning back was impossible. Every step made the light seem farther away, stretching the hallway endlessly. The walls bent slightly, like they were closing in, ready to crush him. The faint sound of a bell rang, but it was distorted, metallic, and broken. The lockers lining the wall began to bang, open and shut violently. Hands reached out from the lockers, grasping blindly at his arms and clothes. He shoved past them, running faster, as the hallway shook beneath his feet. The light ahead flickered like a candle about to die, leaving him in dread. The sound of footsteps echoed again, only this time ahead of him. Someone, or something, was waiting at the end of the hall. A tall figure stood in the faint glow, blocking his path completely. Its body was covered in shadows, shifting like smoke, but denser, heavier. Two glowing eyes pierced through the dark, burning like molten fire. It tilted its head slowly, as if studying him, before moving closer. The sound of chains dragging across the floor followed its every step. He backed away, but the lockers slammed shut behind him, trapping him. The figure raised its arm and pointed straight at him accusingly. His chest tightened like invisible hands were squeezing his heart slowly. He gasped, struggling for breath as the air grew thick and suffocating. The whispers returned louder this time, chanting words he could not hear. The figure opened its mouth, but no sound came, only a terrible silence. His ears rang painfully as blood trickled from his nose without warning. The figure vanished suddenly, like smoke leaving only the chains behind. The chains slithered toward him like snakes rattling across the tiles. He knew the school itself wanted him bound forever. The chains wrapped around his ankles, pulling hard until he fell. He clawed at the floor, dragging himself forward as sparks flew from chains. The ground beneath him cracked open, revealing darkness like a void. He screamed as the chains yanked harder, dragging him closer to the hole. Cold wind rushed upward, carrying the smell of burnt flesh and ashes. Voices cried out from the hole, begging for help, screaming endlessly. Hands reached from the void, skeletal and burned, grabbing at his legs. He kicked desperately, breaking free from some, but more replaced them. His fingernails broke against the tiles as he clawed for escape. The ceiling lights exploded one by one, showering him in sparks. His own reflection appeared on the cracked floor, smiling cruelly at him. The laughter of children mixed with the screams from the void. With one final burst of strength, he tore free, stumbling backward. The void sealed shut instantly, as though it never existed at all. He collapsed, shaking, as the hallway fell into heavy silence. He pushed himself up, trembling, his legs weak but still moving forward. The silence pressed on him, heavy like a weight crushing his chest. Every shadow seemed alive, bending toward him, reaching with hunger. He whispered prayers to himself, though his voice cracked with fear. A faint glow appeared at the far corner of the hallway, flickering gently. It looked like candlelight, moving slowly, as if carried by someone unseen. He followed cautiously, because standing still meant certain death. The glow turned into a small figure of a child holding a candle. The child looked pale, translucent, with hollow black eyes staring silently. Its lips moved, but no sound came, though he felt words in his head. The child whispered, "Leave before it finds you again, before it takes you." The candle flickered wildly, and the child melted into shadows instantly. The hallway shook again this time, with deep growls from below the floor. Dust and plaster fell from the ceiling, cracking with each vibration. He knew something much worse was coming closer to him now. The growls became louder, shaking the lockers and breaking glass nearby. The ground beneath him heaved upward like something massive crawled under it. He stumbled forward, running as the floor split apart behind him violently. From the crack rose a monstrous head, twisted and malformed with too many teeth. Its eyes glowed sickly yellow, burning into his soul with hatred. The creature roared, sending a wave of hot air that knocked him down. The lockers flew open, violently slamming shut in rhythm with the roar. The walls cracked, bleeding dark liquid that smelled of rust and decay. The monster dragged itself, higher claws scraping, leaving sparks on tiles. Its massive body barely fit the hallway, twisting unnaturally with every move. He scrambled to his feet, running toward another stairwell at the end. The creature smashed through lockers, crawling after him with terrifying speed. Its claws reached close, swiping inches from his back, tearing his shirt. The stairwell door appeared closer, though it flickered like an illusion. He prayed it was real, as the roar echoed, shaking his bones. He threw himself at the stairwell door, slamming his shoulder hard into it. The door burst open, and he tumbled down the stairs, scraping his arms. Behind him, the monster slammed into the walls, shaking the entire building. The stairwell lights flickered blood red before shattering into darkness. He grabbed the railing, pulling himself up as the creature forced through. Its enormous claws gripped the stairs, bending metal and cracking stone. He raced downward, heart racing as every step echoed like thunder. The stairwell spiraled, endlessly twisting deeper like it had no bottom. He screamed for help, but his voice was swallowed by the darkness. The growls echoed closer behind him, shaking dust loose from the walls. Suddenly he saw another door, glowing faintly in the black void below. The handle shined, as if calling him toward it, begging him to escape. He jumped the last steps, crashing into the door with desperation. The stairwell behind him collapsed as the creature roared deafeningly. He pulled the handle, praying it would open in time. The door flung open, revealing a massive library hidden deep inside. Rows of ancient bookshelves stretched endlessly, vanishing into shadows. Candles floated in the air, casting eerie yellow glows across the room. The silence was thick, except for faint whispers echoing between shelves. He stepped inside, slowly shutting the door behind him with relief. The library smelled of mold, dust, and something metallic underneath. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the spines of the books, whispering softly. One book in the center table glowed brighter, as if waiting for him. He reached for it, but the pages flipped open by themselves, violently. The writing inside burned into his eyes, though he could not understand. His hands shook as he realized the pages were filled with his life story. Every moment, every choice, every fear, written in red ink like blood. The whispers grew louder, urging him to keep reading and never stop. The door slammed shut behind him, locking with a sound like chains. He knew this library was not a refuge, but another trap, waiting. The storm outside grew heavier, with winds howling against the old wooden walls. The candle flames inside the house flickered violently, casting long dancing shadows. Elena clutched her brother's hand tighter, whispering prayers for safety and strength. The air smelled of wet soil and ancient dust, mixing in a strange, unsettling way. Somewhere far in the distance, they heard a horn echo like a call from another realm. The horn was deep, sorrowful, and filled with a haunting melody that pierced their hearts. A dog barked in the distance, but was quickly silenced as if swallowed by the darkness. Rainwater leaked from the ceiling, dripping steadily into a rusty tin container on the floor. Each drop echoed like a ticking clock counting down to an unseen arrival. The house groaned under the force of the storm, like it was alive and resisting something. Suddenly a shadow moved across the window, though no one was outside to cast it. The children gasped their eyes wide as the shadow paused and then slowly drifted away. Silence followed for a brief moment before the horn sounded again, louder than before. The old clock in the corner chimed. Though its hands had stopped hours ago, Elena felt an invisible presence pressing on her chest, like something watching and waiting. The storm outside did not calm. It only grew more furious, shaking the earth beneath them. The candlelight turned dimmer, as if the flame itself feared what was approaching. Elena whispered to her brother that something was not right with this night at all. The walls seemed to breathe faintly in and out, like lungs filling with ancient air. The wooden floor creaked with heavy steps, but no figure appeared before their eyes. Each creak grew closer, until it felt like someone stood right behind them in silence. They dared not turn around, afraid of what might be standing there unseen, but present. The dog that had barked earlier cried out again this time, a long, mournful sound. The horn in the distance blasted a third time, sharper and more commanding. It felt less like music and more like a summons to something deep beneath the storm. The rain outside no longer sounded like water, but like whispers tapping on the windows. Elena closed her eyes tightly, trying to block it out, but the whispers grew clearer. They spoke in a language neither of them understood, filled with echo and sorrow. Her brother clutched her arm, his lips trembling as he mouthed that they were not alone. A sudden knock echoed on the wooden door, slow, deliberate, and cold like fate itself. The knock repeated 3 times, shaking the door but not breaking it open yet. Elena felt her heart pounding so loud it drowned the thunder roaring outside the house. Her brother whispered that maybe it was a traveler seeking shelter from the storm, but her instincts screamed that no traveler would come with such a dreadful horn. The knock grew louder each time, as if demanding attention, refusing to be ignored. The air grew colder, their breaths visible in the candlelit room, fogging with fear. The door rattled again, but this time without sound, as though touched by invisible hands. The old clock struck once more, though frozen. Its face glowed faintly in the dim room. Shadows moved along the wall, stretching unnaturally long like ropes of darkness. Elena gathered courage and asked in a trembling voice, who was there, in the storm? No answer, came only the sound of the horn, again, this time, right outside the house. The dog whined again before falling into sudden silence like it had vanished completely. The candle flames burst higher, suddenly burning blue instead of their golden glow. Her brother screamed, pointing at the window, where 2 glowing eyes peered inside. The eyes were pale and lifeless, yet filled with endless hunger that froze their souls. The glowing eyes outside blinked once, then vanished, leaving only darkness behind. Elena ran to the door, locking it tightly, though she knew locks meant nothing tonight. The sound of chains dragging across the porch echoed like a warning from the past. Her brother sobbed quietly, gripping her arm, begging her not to open anything. The horn blew once more, but softer, like it was right at their ears. Inside the house, shadows gathered around the room, shifting like living smoke curling around the walls. The candle flames dimmed again, turning into tiny blue sparks fighting to stay alive. Elena whispered that they had to stay strong no matter what appeared before them. Suddenly a handprint formed on the frosted window, though no one stood outside. The handprint was enormous, with long fingers that pressed slowly across the glass. The air filled with a sour, metallic smell, like rust mixed with wet stone and blood. Elena's brother fainted from fear, collapsing into her lap, his body trembling violently. She shook him frantically, whispering for him to wake, but he remained still and pale. The shadows in the room circled closer, pressing against them like invisible chains. A whisper crawled into her ear, saying, "Open the door. and we will spare the child." Elena shook her head, refusing to obey. Though her knees weakened under the pressure, the voice was neither male nor female. It was ancient, hollow, and heavy with sorrow. She covered her brother with a blanket, as if fabric could protect from spirits. Outside, the storm grew silent for a moment, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The silence was worse than the noise, filling the room with unbearable tension. Elena dared to whisper that she would never open the door for anything tonight. The whisper returned, sharper, angrier, demanding she obey or face eternal darkness. The candle went out, leaving the room in pitch blackness. Only lightning lit the space. In the flash, she saw the shadow of a tall figure standing directly in the middle of the room. Her body froze. Her voice caught in her throat as the lightning faded to dark again. Her brother stirred slightly, groaning though still unconscious from the fear's weight. The chains outside rattled again, dragging closer to the door, scraping across the wood. Elena held her breath, trembling tears falling down her cheeks as she prayed again. The horn blew for the 5th time, shaking the walls and rattling every object inside. The figure whispered again, "Open the door, Elena, or lose everything you love forever." The night wind carried whispers through the hollow trees. Every step of the boy echoed like a warning. He clutched the lantern tighter as its flame shook. Shadows crawled along the ground like living creatures. The abandoned cabin appeared at the forest edge, its roof broken, its windows empty like black eyes. He felt a pull stronger than fear drawing him in. The door creaked open without him touching it. Inside, the air was thick, like old dust and secrets. A rocking chair moved slowly, though no one sat there. The boy's breath grew heavy like chains on his chest. A whisper said his name, stretching it like silk. He turned, but nothing was behind him, only dark. The lantern flame flickered low, ready to die. He knew the real terror was waiting upstairs. The stairs groaned like old bones under his weight. Each step pulled him deeper into silence. The boy's hand brushed the wall and felt claw marks. The air smelled of iron and wet soil mixed. At the top, the hallway stretched like it never ended. Doors lined both sides, each one slightly open. Whispers slipped out of them like leaking smoke. He chose the last door, where the sound was loudest. Inside the room stood a mirror cracked in half. His reflection moved, but his body stayed still. The reflection smiled a sharp, unnatural grin. It raised its hand while the boy did not move. The boy felt his chest tighten, unable to breathe. The reflection whispered, "I have been waiting." Then its hand pushed through the glass toward him. Cold fingers wrapped around his wrist like ice chains. The boy tried to pull away, but the grip tightened. The mirror surface rippled like black water. It began dragging him inside inch by inch. The lantern dropped and shattered into sparks. Darkness swallowed the room like an endless sea. The boy screamed, but no sound left his lips. On the other side of the mirror, something moved. Shapes twisted, shadows crawling with glowing eyes. The reflection whispered, "Welcome home, child." The boy's vision blurred with tears of fear. He felt his body losing all warmth and light. Every heartbeat sounded like thunder inside his skull. The shadows reached out, hungry for his soul. The boy's last thought was that he had crossed over. Silence filled the room after the mirror went still. The lantern lay broken, the fire already gone. The house stood quiet, as if nothing happened. But deep inside the mirror, the boy struggled. He pounded against the glass, screaming for help. His face pale, his eyes wide with horror. The reflection, now free, walked the empty room. It touched the walls, leaving black marks behind. It laughed without sound, shaking the air itself. The reflection now wore the boy's body like skin. Outside the cabin, the forest grew darker. The moon vanished behind clouds. Heavy and cold, animals fled from the cabin without reason. The reflection looked at the world with hungry eyes. It whispered, "Freedom," at last into the night. The village far away felt the change. Instantly, dogs howled as if warning of unseen terror. Old women woke from sleep, clutching their chests. The air grew colder as if winter had arrived. Candles in homes flickered and went out, suddenly. People whispered that the forest had awakened. No one dared to step outside after midnight. The boy's mother woke, sensing something missing. She looked at his empty bed with dread. Her heart pounded as she called his name. The wind answered instead, carrying faint laughter. The villagers gathered, whispering old legends. They spoke of mirrors that trapped human soul. They knew the curse had returned once again, and the reflection now walked among them unseen. The night grew heavier with silence, and every breath felt like it carried weight. Evelyn kept her hand on the ancient door, afraid it might vanish if she let go. The walls trembled with unseen whispers, crawling like shadows on her skin. Marcus tried to speak, but his voice was swallowed by the thick darkness. A cold draft circled around them, as if testing their strength and courage. The wooden floor moaned under invisible footsteps that did not belong to them. From the far end of the corridor, a faint glow appeared, soft and trembling. It was not fire. It was not lantern. It was something older and deeper. Evelyn whispered that it might be the source they had been searching for. The glow pulsed like a heartbeat, guiding them closer with every flicker. Their fear turned into urgency as they felt destiny pulling them forward. The corridor narrowed as if the house itself was forcing them into one path. Every breath echoed louder as silence stretched between heartbeats. Marcus held the candle tighter, its flame shaking like his resolve. The glow called them silently, and there was no turning back anymore. The closer they moved, the heavier the air became, thick like water. Their footsteps slowed as if dragged by unseen chains of memory. The glow revealed a grand door carved with symbols that pulsed faintly, each symbol twisted alive, shifting like serpents caught in eternal motion. Evelyn touched the door, and her hand burned with visions, not her own. She saw the first builders of this house, ancient eyes filled with secrets. She saw offerings, sacrifices, and vows whispered in forgotten tongues. Marcus saw nothing but felt the weight pressing down on his chest. The door was alive, breathing, feeding on their fear and their hope. Evelyn knew that opening it would mean stepping into a realm beyond time. The house held its breath as if waiting for their decision. Shadows gathered behind them, closing off every chance of escape. Their hearts beat in unison like drums echoing in a distant war. The glow throbbed stronger, each pulse demanding their surrender. Marcus whispered they had no choice, and the door slowly opened. Inside the chamber, the air was colder than death and thicker than smoke. The glow came from a massive stone at the center, beating like a heart. Dark veins spread across the floor, feeding on the stone's terrible light. The walls were covered with faces screaming silently from the stone itself. Evelyn felt tears she could not explain. Flowing down her trembling cheeks, Marcus fell to his knees, as his mind filled with voices of the forgotten. The stone whispered promises of knowledge, of power, of endless life. But every promise came wrapped with chains forged from despair. Evelyn felt both drawn and repelled like a moth, circling a dying flame. The candle in Marcus's hand extinguished without wind or reason. Darkness consumed the edges of the chamber, pressing them inward. The stone pulsed faster, each beat shaking the chamber like thunder. Shadows formed into figures circling around them, with hollow eyes. Evelyn clutched Marcus's hand to anchor herself to reality. They realized the stone was not treasure. It was a prison for something worse. The shadows took form of ancient keepers, guardians bound by the stone. They moved without sound, their presence heavy like mountains. Their eyes glowed with sorrow, not anger, but sorrow deeper than oceans. Marcus tried to speak, but his words were stolen before they could form. Evelyn stepped forward, her body shaking, yet her will stronger than ever. The keepers bowed slightly, as if recognizing something inside her. The stone pulsed brighter, reacting to her presence, like it knew her blood. A voice filled the chamber, not from lips but from the stone itself. It spoke of a covenant forged long before the house was built, a covenant broken by greed and forgotten by those who followed. The house was not cursed, it was bound to keep the stone contained. Evelyn was not here by chance, she was called by the covenant itself. Marcus realized they had walked into destiny, not into coincidence. The keepers moved aside, clearing a path toward the pulsing stone. The chamber waited for her choice, silence sharper than any blade. Evelyn felt the weight of countless lives pressing into her trembling soul. The stone pulsed like it wanted to break free and devour the world. Marcus begged her to step back, but her feet were locked to the floor. She felt bloodlines she did not know whispering inside her veins. The keepers watched with their hollow eyes unblinking, unbroken. Her heart thundered louder than the stone, and she lifted her hand. The moment her fingers touched the stone, the chamber erupted in light. Every shadow screamed without sound, their mouths stretched in agony. The light wrapped around Evelyn, lifting her above the cold floor. Marcus shielded his eyes but could not look away from the storm. The stone cracked like ice splitting under unbearable weight. Visions poured into Evelyn, showing centuries of sorrow and betrayal. She saw the birth of the covenant, the breaking of vows, the rise of hunger. Her body shook as if it would shatter into pieces of memory and dust. Yet her spirit refused to break, and the stone bowed before her. The chamber shook violently as dust rained from the ceiling above. Marcus pulled Evelyn down, but the light kept her floating higher. The keepers fell to their knees, as if worshipping her very existence. The stone split wider, releasing streams of black mist like poison. The mist tried to wrap around Evelyn, but her glow burned it away. Her eyes turned white with power, yet her voice was still human. She called upon the covenant, commanding the stone to surrender. The walls echoed with ancient cries, both of rage and of relief. The ground opened with cracks stretching like veins of fire. Marcus shouted her name, but his voice was lost in the storm. The keepers rose and joined hands, creating a circle of binding. The mist fought against them, twisting into monstrous shapes. Evelyn's body glowed brighter until she was no longer herself. The chamber turned into a battlefield of light and shadow. Destiny was unfolding, and there was no stopping it anymore. The mist took the shape of a beast, taller than the chamber itself. Its eyes burned with hatred, its mouth filled with endless teeth. Marcus froze as the creature roared, shaking the chamber apart. Evelyn floated before it, her glow the only shield between them. The keepers strained their circle, their hollow bodies trembling. The beast struck the ground, claws tearing through the stone itself. Black fire erupted, licking the walls with fury, older than creation. Evelyn raised her hands, and the glow split into waves of light. The light clashed with the fire, filling the chamber with storm. Marcus held onto the crumbling wall, refusing to leave her side. The beast screamed, shaking the faces on the walls into life. Every face cried in pain, their voices filling the chamber like thunder. Evelyn's glow flared brighter, pushing the beast back step by step. The stone beneath them cracked further, bleeding with black veins. The battle of fate had begun, and the outcome was uncertain. The beast lunged forward with a roar, shaking the chamber apart. Evelyn summoned her strength, pouring her soul into the light. The glow spread across the floor, burning away the spreading mist. The keepers tightened their circle, chanting words of forgotten power. Marcus prayed silently. Though he did not know who he prayed to, the beast clawed against the light, but screamed as it burned. Its body twisted, writhing like shadows fighting against the dawn. Evelyn's voice filled the chamber, commanding the beast to kneel. Her words were not her own, they were voices of the covenant. The chamber shook with their echo, rattling the broken walls. The beast shrank back, its form unstable, like smoke in the wind. The stone pulsed violently, as if tearing itself apart from within. Marcus saw Evelyn's body weaken. Though her spirit only grew stronger, the keepers raised their arms higher, their hollow forms glowing together. They pushed the beast back into the core of the stone. The stone screamed with a sound beyond human understanding. Cracks spread across its surface, spilling light instead of shadow. The beast writhed within the stone, clawing to break free again. Evelyn's glow merged with the cracks, sealing them with fire. The keepers pressed their final strength, locking their circle tight. Marcus cried out as Evelyn's body fell, but her spirit stayed bound. She hovered between worlds, not living, not gone, but eternal. The chamber's walls collapsed, but the light held them together. The beast let out one last scream before vanishing into silence. The stone split in two, releasing a rush of pure white light. The keepers fell to the ground, their bodies dissolving into dust. Evelyn floated down, her eyes still glowing with covenant power. Marcus caught her. Though his hands shook with fear and awe, the chamber grew still, the storm replaced by endless calm. The covenant had been restored, but at a terrible cost. Evelyn opened her eyes, and her voice carried power, not her own. She whispered that the beast was sealed, but never truly destroyed. Marcus held her close, knowing she was no longer just herself. The house stopped trembling, its curse lifted into quiet air. The faces on the walls faded into peace, their cries silenced. The candle relit on its own, glowing steady, without fear. The chamber turned to dust, dissolving into the earth itself. The stone no longer glowed, only broken shards remained on the floor. Evelyn stood, though her steps were weaker than before. She said the covenant demanded a guardian, and now it had her. Marcus begged her to leave. But she shook her head with sorrow. The keepers were gone, and their duty was now her eternal fate. The night outside grew calm as the storm faded into nothing. The silence was heavy, yet peaceful, like the world exhaled relief. Their journey had ended, but the story of the covenant had just begun. The wind carried voices that seemed to belong to no living soul. Each whisper curled through the cold corridors like fingers dragging across stone. Shadows swayed without reason, as if something unseen walked among them. The young ones clung to each other, afraid to breathe too loud. Every corner of the place looked like it was waiting to swallow them whole. The lamps flickered, as though invisible hands pressed against their light. No comfort remained in this mansion, only endless dread. The staircases moaned under unseen weight, doors rattled though no one touched them. A low hum filled the halls like a song sung by the dead. They could feel the floor vibrating beneath their trembling feet. Walls seemed closer, tighter, pressing them in with invisible force. They felt eyes glaring through every crack of the wood. Fear was no longer just inside them, it lived in the air itself. They knew the house was alive, and it hated them. A cry echoed from upstairs, though none of them dared to climb. It was not human, but filled with pain and rage. The air grew colder, and their breath became thick clouds. They heard chains dragging across the floor above. Each clank shook their bones with terror. One of them whispered that maybe it was a warning. Another said maybe it wanted them to leave before worse things began. The sound drew closer, as if something descended step by step. They stared at the staircase, waiting for what would appear. The wood cracked under weight, heavier than any man. Every candle guttered, struggling to stay lit. A rotten smell spread, burning their noses and throats. They could almost taste death itself moving toward them. The silence after each drag was worse than the noise itself. They realized something unseen had reached the bottom of the stairs. The children backed into the corner, clutching each other tight. Their hearts pounded like drums, echoing louder than the chains. The smell grew stronger, filling their mouths with bitterness. Cold wrapped their bodies like frozen hands. The floor groaned under a presence that remained unseen. Suddenly a shadow stretched across the wall, tall and twisted. It bent and snapped like bones breaking in silence. They could not scream, only watch in horror. The chain clattered against the floor again. A heavy breath filled the hallway, long and jagged. They felt the air thicken, making it harder to breathe. One child began to pray, though her voice shook. Her words seemed to anger the shadow. The chain snapped once louder than before. The room trembled as if something tried to break free. A whisper slithered from the darkness, saying, "Leave." The sound was not human. It was layered with many voices. Each word made the walls shake and the windows rattle. The children clung tighter to each other, shivering in dread. One of them dropped the lantern, and the glass shattered. Flames sputtered but refused to light again. The whisper turned into laughter, sharp and cruel. It circled them, though nothing visible was near. The chain dragged again, but this time closer to their feet. They jumped back, pressing against the wall. One voice whispered their names slowly and carefully. Each child froze, hearing their name spoken by the dark. Tears streamed down their faces in silence. The laughter stopped, but the chains moved faster. Something unseen was no longer warning, it was hunting. They ran into the next room, slamming the door behind them. The sound of the chain followed, scraping closer and louder. The room smelled of mold and old blood. Broken furniture lay scattered as if something violent happened there. The windows were nailed shut, trapping them in. The children tried to push against the door, but it shook. Something pounded from the other side with unnatural strength. Cracks spread across the wood under each hit. Dust fell from the ceiling as the pounding grew faster. The floor beneath them shifted like something crawled underneath. Every second the walls seemed to close tighter. A painting on the wall fell without touch. Behind it, they found a hole carved into the stone. Cold air rushed out, carrying faint whispers. They had no choice but to crawl into the darkness inside. The passage was narrow, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees. The stones scraped their skin, leaving cuts that burned in the cold. The whispers followed, echoing down the tunnel. Chains rattled behind them, scraping against stone. They crawled faster, but the space grew tighter. The darkness seemed endless, with no light ahead. Breathing became harder as the air grew thinner. Something brushed against their legs, though nothing was there. One child screamed, but the sound was swallowed instantly. The walls felt alive, pulsing faintly like beating hearts. The ground beneath their palms turned sticky. When they pulled their hands up, blood smeared their skin. The whispers now laughed louder, chasing them deeper. They could not go back. The chain blocked the path. Only forward remained, though it led to more terror. At last, they crawled out into a chamber, vast and empty. The ceiling rose high, covered in strange carvings. In the center stood a black stone altar drenched in old stains. Candles lit themselves one by one, casting shadows on the walls. The children circled together, terrified of what they saw. The air carried the scent of iron and ash. Chains hung from the ceiling, swaying, though no wind moved. The whispers silenced, but a low hum began instead. The altar pulsed like it was alive. Strange symbols glowed faintly across the floor. They realized this was the heart of the mansion. Every step echoed louder than normal. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the walls. The chamber felt like a grave where time had stopped. Something ancient was watching from the darkness above. Suddenly the altar split open with a crack. From within rose a figure wrapped in chains and ash. Its face was hidden by a mask carved from bone. Eyes glowed faint red, burning like dying fire. The chains tightened around its body, rattling as it moved. It raised one hand and the air turned heavy. The children dropped to their knees, unable to stand. Their bodies froze, as if controlled by invisible strings. The figure spoke in the same layered voices as before, each word dug into their skulls like claws. It demanded silence and obedience. The chamber walls dripped with black liquid like tar shadows reached from the floor. Wrapping around their arms, the chains clattered like 1,000 snakes moving at once. The figure leaned closer until its breath touched their faces. The children screamed, but no sound escaped. Their voices were stolen, leaving their mouths open in silence. The figure smiled behind the mask, a crack revealing teeth too sharp. It circled them, dragging chains that sparked against the floor. The ground shook under its every step. Symbols on the floor glowed brighter with each movement. The altar bled shadows that spread across the room. Each child felt cold sinking into their bones. The figure whispered promises of freedom if they obeyed, but in its voice was hunger that wanted more than obedience. One child tried to resist by clutching a charm from her neck. The charm glowed faintly, pushing back the shadows. The figure hissed and recoiled in rage. Chains lashed out, slamming against the stone walls. The room howled with fury as the fight for their souls began. The charm light spread across the chamber. The children felt strength returning to their limbs. The shadows screamed as they burned in the glow. The figure staggered, but its chains lashed wildly. The ground split open, releasing fire and ash. The air filled with the sound of thousands of cries. The children held tighter to the charm, refusing to let go. Their voices returned, and they began to chant together. Their cries grew louder, rising above the whispers. The altar cracked further, spilling more black liquid. The figure howled in rage, shaking the walls, but the glow wrapped around them like a shield. The chains shattered one by one, falling to the ground. The chamber trembled like the mansion itself was breaking apart. They realized they had awakened the true curse of the place. The forest was trembling with a silence that felt alive. Shadows were not still, they were shifting like restless souls. Every tree seemed to lean closer as if listening to whispers. The cold air pressed against their skin with invisible hands. Sarah clutched her lantern, but its flame quivered weakly. Michael kept scanning the treetops for unseen movement. The path looked endless, though they had walked it many times. The river nearby gurgled, yet even the sound felt sinister. An owl screeched, but its cry broke like a human wail. The ground pulsed beneath their feet like a buried heartbeat. Branches snapped without any visible cause in the distance. Leaves swirled, though no wind touched their faces. Their breath became smoke, painting fear into the night. They held each other's hands tighter with trembling strength. The weight of the unseen pressed closer with each step. From the dark, a faint glow appeared like a beckoning star. It was not moonlight, but a pale green shimmer ahead. Sarah whispered that it was calling them, but not kindly. Michael felt the air vibrate like chanting beneath the earth. The glow flickered, forming shapes of faces twisted in sorrow. Every step toward it made the forest darker behind them. The trees seemed to lock together, sealing their return path. A low hum rose from the soil, as if bones were singing. Sarah's lantern sputtered as if surrendering to the glow. Michael heard his own name spoken, though no mouth was near. The shimmer shifted, forming a door made of woven light. Cold rushed through them like 1,000 icy hands. They wanted to turn back, but their feet betrayed them. The glow widened like jaws of a beast waiting patiently. Something inside the door whispered, "Welcome," without sound. Crossing through, they entered a world that felt hollow. The sky was not black, but a swirling canvas of gray. The ground cracked beneath them like dried old skin. Buildings stood, but were twisted like melted statues. Figures wandered faceless, yet carried shadows for heads. Their bodies dragged chains that clinked without rhythm. The air was heavy with grief, thicker than smoke. Sarah felt her chest tighten like ropes squeezing her lungs. Michael tried to speak, but his voice vanished into silence. The faceless figures turned, sensing their presence. Chains rattled louder, echoing into endless emptiness. One figure raised its arm, pointing toward a black tower. The tower loomed, pulsing, as if alive with heartbeat rhythm. Sarah whispered, "This was where the curse was born." The faceless crowd parted, leaving a path toward it. The tower doors were carved with scenes of endless torment. Hands reached from stone as if clawing for freedom. Eyes carved into the walls, wept streams of black liquid. The ground at its base quivered like living flesh. Sarah and Michael pushed the door, but it opened itself. Inside, the stench of decay mixed with burning air, torches lit by themselves lining walls of bone and ash. Stairs spiraled upward, groaning with every step taken. Voices echoed, whispering secrets that were not theirs. Some words were names they had never spoken aloud. Others were memories twisted into lies of despair. The climb felt endless, though the tower coiled upward. Their legs grew heavy, but an unseen pull dragged them. At the top stood a throne made of skulls and iron. Upon it sat a figure cloaked in shadows without form. The shadow lifted its head, revealing eyes of burning white. Its voice entered their minds like knives slicing thought. It welcomed them as the chosen carriers of suffering. It spoke of chains that fed on generations of fear. Sarah's knees weakened, but Michael stood defiant. He asked why their family had been cursed with this burden. The shadow laughed like thunder shaking the tower. It said curses are chosen by fear and accepted by blood. Sarah cried, saying, "They never asked for such darkness." The shadow leaned forward, its breath like ash on their faces. It declared they must either take its place or be consumed. The throne quivered as if alive. Waiting for one of them, Michael grabbed Sarah's hand and swore they would resist. The shadow's laughter shook walls, making skulls chatter. The choice pressed upon them like mountains collapsing. Michael shouted that the curse would end with them tonight. Sarah echoed his cry with trembling strength of her soul. The tower shook as cracks burst across its walls. Chains shot from the ground, wrapping around their arms. But instead of fear, they screamed with fire of defiance. The chains burned brighter until snapping into sparks. The faceless figures below howled as if freed from torment. The shadow roared, its body writhing like smoke unraveling. The throne shattered, scattering bones across the floor. The tower began collapsing under weight of broken curses. Sarah and Michael clung to each other in the chaos. A blinding white light erupted from the heart of the tower. It consumed the shadow, tearing it into fragments of ash. The air cleared, and the faceless souls began to vanish. The curse screamed one final time before silence claimed it. When the light faded, they stood in the forest again. The night was calm, yet charged with strange new energy. The moon glowed brighter, as if cleansed of sorrow. The air was soft, carrying scent of earth after rain. Sarah looked around and saw no trace of darkness. Michael touched his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady. The trees no longer leaned, but stood tall in silence. The path behind them stretched open and clear. The lantern burned strong with golden flame, unshaken. Owls hooted gently, like guardians of peace restored. The ground no longer pulsed but rested quietly. They realized they had broken a chain centuries old. The whispers in the air had finally gone still. A sense of freedom pressed into their souls warmly. The forest was alive again, but with calm harmony. They walked back to the village as dawn was breaking. The sun rose, painting gold over rooftops and fields. Villagers stirred, but their eyes looked brighter than before. Children laughed freely without shadows in their smiles. Elders bowed, sensing the curse had finally lifted. Sarah felt tears. But this time of joy and relief, Michael held her hand as villagers gathered in awe. The story of their courage spread like fire through hearts. People sang songs thanking them for ending the darkness. The chains of fear that bound generations had dissolved. The land breathed with freedom. For the first time in ages, flowers bloomed early. As if earth itself rejoiced, rivers sparkled flowing like veins of silver light. The sky stretched endlessly without storm or shadow. Their names were whispered as saviors of the forgotten. Days passed, yet peace only grew stronger in the land. No more whispers haunted the nights in the forest. Children played near its edge without trembling fear. The cursed tower was gone, leaving only soft grass. Sarah painted the story on scrolls to preserve memory. Michael trained young ones to stand fearless of shadows. Together, they became keepers of courage, not of fear. The villagers built a shrine of light to honor their fight. Candles burned there each night, glowing like stars on earth. Travelers arrived from afar to see the place of freedom. The land prospered, with harvests full and skies clear. The air felt lighter, like a burden finally lifted forever. Every home sang with laughter, no longer broken by cries. The curse was now only a story, told by firelight, but its lesson lived in every beating heart of the people. One night, Sarah and Michael sat under the silver moon. The forest whispered, but now with songs of peace. They knew the darkness would never return again. The land was free, the people were strong and unbroken. Generations ahead would live without fear of chains. Faceless souls were resting where no pain reached. The shadow was gone, its throne shattered beyond return. Sarah placed her head on Michael's shoulder with a smile. He whispered that their fight would be remembered forever. The stars burned bright as if writing their story above. The air hummed with the quiet power of reborn freedom. They closed their eyes, hearing only the calm night song. The journey had ended not in despair, but in hope. The curse was destroyed, the land had awakened, and peace stretched into eternity like endless dawn.